Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you want to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 21 of A Series of Death. The voices were loud and joyous as Trembor entered the watering hole. He had to dodge prey and predator that moved from table to table, drink in hand, congratulating one another on his way to the bar. There he received a nod from Elnard as his cousin made the series of drinks for his server to deliver. A sleek fox and ermine were working with the regular bear tonight. Trembor sat at one of the few available stools, and Elnard placed a glass of alcoholic blood before him as he crossed to the other side to serve people standing there demanding attention. He drank a quarter of the glass, and his neighboring stool changed proprietor 3 times before his cousin returned, breathing hard. Should I start calling ahead to reserve a stool? Trembor asked, trying not to laugh at the other lion's bedraggled expression. Office party, Elnard replied, filling a glass with water and drinking most in one go. Someone's got promoted at an actuarial firm, so you can imagine I didn't expect this level of, he looked around, energy. Steady Trembor. How are you doing? Have you heard about Bo? Trembor studied his cousin. Elnar shrugged. I heard he's on the outs with your dad. Bo's taken up gambling. Elnard winced. And Torum hasn't got in him? It was close at the last dinner. Dad's angry. Bo is, well, Bo, and digging his claws in. There has to be more to it than that if it's unnerving you enough to bring it up here. Bo's in. Tremor closed his mouth, frowned, then shook his head. Elnard already knew the little he could talk about. The lion chuckled. Ah, the famous Trembor neutrality. Keeping all those family secrets is hounding you now, isn't it? You're one to talk. Tremble replied, smiling. How many people have told you things here you feel duty-bound not to divulge? The difference is that it's mainly strangers who talk to me here. It's mainly strangers who talk to me here. I can count on one hand the times it's put me in any kind of a bind, and the worst I've had to deal with was an unexpected expense, and fitting all that extra meat in my cooler. Tremble tilted an ear, and Elnard shrugged. Neither side was being reasonable. I don't think you can resort to that with family. Tremble shook his head. Whichever I'd end up putting in my cooler, I'd have to do with Serene. The other lion shuddered. Now that's a scary female. Did your dad ever say how they hooked up? Trevor chuckled. That's a story you need to hear directly from her, he grinned, showing teeth. Ask her the next time everyone's together. Absolutely not, Elnard smiled. I want to live long enough for me and Tiff to have plenty of cubs. Someone called for him from the other end of the bar in the lion's side. Breaks over. Signal me if you need a refill. You get 2 more, then I'm cutting you off, even if you are family. He drank slowly, trying to come up with a way around his self-imposed restriction on sharing what he knew about Bo. He'd like his cousin's opinion on it. Maybe he'd have an idea on how to fix it. Marlot would be the better person to talk with. He realized as he had his pad. Wow. Marlot would be the better person to talk with, he realized, and he had his pad in hand the pad in his hand, the number on it before he stopped himself. He'd promised himself he was done with that wolf. That's a lot of himself. Well, 2 of them. That's 1 too many. He stopped. Promised himself he was done with that wolf. While he stared at the pad, his neighbors changed, and in his peripheral vision, bulky in a sweater was replaced with short in a suit, lean in a jogging attire by young in leather and chains. What if sticking to that promise meant Bo was pulled deeper into debt? He placed the pad down. Why did life have to be so damn complicated? Marlot knew people within the underworld, and unlike his friends within the enforcers, he wouldn't decide Bo needed to be turned into a pawn so they could arrest as many criminals as possible. Turnbull didn't want his brother pulled in deeper, whatever direction that ended up being. He wanted him out from under all those problems. But Marlowe would attach a price to his help. Trembor would have to be the one who was under someone else's control, and he was never allowing that again. A cheer erupted, and the short male in the suit next to him winced hard enough his drink sloshed over the rim. The hare gave Trembor a sheepish smile as he mopped the liquid with a napkin. Not comfortable in large crowds? Trevor asked, finishing his drink and motioning to Elnard for a refill. I grew up with 30 or so siblings, the hare said, folding the wet napkin and placing it on Elnard's side of the bar. Crowds are normal for us. Another cheer made him wince again. It's the sudden, loud noise that puts me on edge. Another sheepish smile. It's usually a sign of predators about to strike. The watering hole's the predation bar. You don't have to worry about that here. I know. The hare raised his glass to Elnard, so Elnard could wipe the counter as he placed a full glass before Trembor. It's why I come. But instinct has saved my life often enough that when it goes loud, roar, hide, and claws us whole, I listen. Elnard looked like he regretted opening the bar as he left Trembor's area to go serve Morka demanding customer. I have to agree it served you well, Trembor said, since you're still around today. He looked at the number displayed on his pad, trying to decide what to do about it. I don't often see someone agonize over a number they blocked, the hare said, nodding to the pad. Trevor realized the icon was next to Marlo's name. It had been there so long it no longer registered. Someone who could maybe help with family problem. The one called Bo? Trevor narrowed his eyes at the hare. I was waiting for a stool when you spoke with the bartender. I caught the name and that he's in trouble with your father. I didn't mean to pry. Trevor shook his head and to clear his suspicion. It's my fault for talking about it in a bar. I shouldn't expect privacy here. Barkeepers are good people to unload on, the hare said, although I do get the sense the two of you are related, so that might conflict. Elnard's a cousin. The hare nodded to the pad again. If that person can help, what is the issue? He sipped his drink. Trevor ran a finger over the number, a message. The number is currently blocked. Do you wish to remove the block? Appeared. He tapped no. He's my ex. He's my ex. Ah, the air slipped again. Bad breakup? You didn't leave me any choice, Marlot said, looking at him from across the roof of his car, his expression that of being hurt. Took a long swallow from his glass. I broke it up before it turned bad. I see. Silence. Are you certain it would have turned bad? If you knew enough to know it could turn bad, couldn't you also do something to make sure it steered into a different direction? You didn't leave me any choice, Gorek said, standing over Trembor, his expression that of being hurt, even if Trembor was the one with the broken muzzle. He shook his head. I know the type. The only way to avoid it is to steer out of their influence. The hare turned to face Trembor, the angle of his long ear inquisitive. Trembor looked into his glass and waited for the hare to grow bored, but the curiosity only intensified. With a sigh, he placed the glass down. I've been in that situation in that kind of relationship before. The male was a stranger. Trembor could unload on him in a way he couldn't with Elnard, so why not take advantage of it? I experienced how bad it can become before I found the guts to walk away from it. In the hospital kind of bad, he added for emphasis. I was just a cop, but that's no excuse. I'm a predator. I should have known better than to let Gorek charm me into a position where I was nothing more than his possession. The hare studied Trembor in a way that began to feel uncomfortable. And you're certain this male would do the same thing? He indicated the pad. Is it possible you misinterpreted his actions? Are you a counselor? Trembor asked, realizing it would explain the analytical way the hare looked at him, and the male shrugged. Trembor could imagine him as a counselor. As prey, he was unassuming, disarming. Until he'd grown intensely curious, there had been an air of ease around the hare. You don't misinterpret signs when they're the exact same thing that was done to you. The hare nodded thoughtfully. Maybe he doesn't mean to act in such a way. Trembor snorted. He kept up the loving act for 3 years before he let the truth slip. That's intent. He knew what he was doing, and he was fucking good at it. If he hadn't slipped then, he would have turned me into his possession too. He drank half his glass in a long swallow. You barely avoided a predator's teeth once, so you believe you've learned everything there is to know about them. He sipped his glass, only to discover every predator is different. They stalk prey in their own way, bringing them down in unique way. He nodded. More than one prey has become meat because they thought they knew all predators after escaping one. Trevor chuckled. Yeah, you're a counselor. And yes, I've caught more than one meal taking advantage of prey thinking I'd act in specific ways. He looked in his glass, his mood darkening. I hadn't considered how I'd done that with Marlot myself. Is that the male's name? The hare nodded to the pad again. Yeah. And he had me completely fooled with the defenseless act. The hare took his pad out and looked at it before finishing his drink. I need to go, but before I do, I'd like to know something. If you could talk to this male in a place away from prying ears where neither of you had reason to put an act on for the other, do you think you would do that? Ask him why. Let him explain. Trembor opened his mouth to reply no, to spit out the word that he'd never listened to any lies Marlot would tell him, but the word caught in his throat. To be with the wolf again, to put this behind them, to go back to being together, to hold his wolf again. He sighed. How can I believe anything he'd tell me? Abusers lie. They tell you what you want to hear until you drop your guards, then they pounce again. But would you be willing to try, with the right opportunity, to breathe in Marlot's scent? I guess. His eyes stung, and he wiped at them. He thought he'd caught the hare smiling, but then his expression was neutral. I really need to go, he said. I want to be away from here before too many predators realize there's a party going on. The no predation zone ends at the door, and this many drunk prey could cause a frenzy. I don't want to be caught in it. He placed the bill under the empty glass and stood. If I can give you a piece of advice, as someone who isn't a counselor but has seen much of the world, don't let the past define your future. Some people are locked into their path, but others just make mistake and can steer back onto a path that parallels yours instead of going away. Trembor watched the hare weave through the boisterous crowd. He meant well, but it was clear he'd never experienced the kind of abuse Trembor had. Marlot hadn't hacked his pad and locked him out of it by mistake. He didn't leave me any choice. It had been a deliberate act to maintain control over him. Do you want a refill? Elnard asked, indicating the nearly empty glass. Turnbull shook his head, then finished it. The hare that sat here, is he a regular? I thought he was with the party, Elnard replied, frowning. If you ever need someone to help out behind the bar, offer him the job. He has a knack for getting people to open up. Elnar stared at Trimber, ears forward. He got you to open up? What's his name? Trimber opened his muzzle, then paused. I never thought to ask. He didn't ask for mine either. And he's good at maintaining anonymity, Lelnard mused. Claim he isn't a counselor, but I'm pretty sure he is. He has that same way of talking. The same way of talking that the one I had to see after Gorek had. Elnard indicated the pad on the bar. He reopened wounds, I'm guessing. Trevor shrugged and put the pad away. I allowed him to reopen them. I was so taken in by Marlot's act, I never bothered looking for the signs. What if there wasn't any? Elnard asked, still looking at where the pad had been. What do you mean? His cousin looked conflicted. I'm just saying, how would you feel if you could look back on everything clearly and there weren't any sign? Would it still change the current situation? Trember chuckled. Yeah, you need to hire him. He said something similar to about that. He said something similar. This is a new phrase. But what you don't understand is that if there weren't any sign to see, it just means Marlot was craftier than Gorek ever was. Elnar looked like he wanted to say something. Even after a customer called to him by name, he remained before Trember. Finally, he took the hare's bill and glass and moved on to serve the customer, leaving Trember to wonder what his cousin might have wanted to say he felt he couldn't. With his glass empty, Tremor decided he had enough of the bar. The hare had been right about one thing. This much drunk prey was going to cause chaos when they left, and he didn't want to get caught in the middle of that either. He waved to his cousin as he headed out, then tightened his jacket against the cold and noted the predators already taking position around the bar's exit. At least one of them had tried to take on someone who hadn't been drunk enough, by the way he held his side and clearly broken arm, that he hadn't that he had gone to a medical clinic told Trembor some of them were desperate for meat. They'd get their pick soon enough, and even the injured one might be able to get something, might be able to bring someone down. And this concludes chapter 21 of A Series of Death. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next book is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the book as well as the other in the series, they are available at all major e-retailer. If you want to a different way to support me, that is on my Patreon. And if you're looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.